Awesome, thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Yes, Michael Searing from Lutheran Metropolitan Ministry, and Lydia Bailey. She coordinates our awesome volunteer program she's going to tell you about, and was the artist for portraits that we'll also talk about. So we have a PowerPoint that we want to take through. Some of them are just some cool pictures that can go kind of fast, and other ones are some important topics we're going to stay on for a little bit, and want to be able to give an overview of the work we do, and including some talk about the portraits. I did set my alarm for 10:10. That'll be our 5-minute warning, and I'll periodically check it so we can keep rolling. So we're really glad to be here, and let me get this. He said, hit the down button. Let me see. Oh wait. Man, first snafu. Pastor Randy, I even tested it. Oh wait, I was holding it. Is that the way it points, or did I have it back upside down? Yeah. All right, there. Yeah. When you turn something up, the down becomes the top. So, lessons learned. And I know we're videotaping, so we're gonna do some major editing here on that. All right, so we're gonna talk a little bit about our mission and services. So at Lutheran Metropolitan Ministry, we basically work with people who are oppressed, forgotten, and hurting, and we have different branches of services. I know the food truck's going to be here next week. That's part of our workforce development program. We do guardianship services, work with youth, advocacy. My area is the housing and shelter area, where our mission is to provide emergency shelter, supportive services, and solutions to homelessness. So a few things about our shelters. First, it's really awesome and important to note that our community subscribes to a concept of right to shelter, meaning we have enough shelter beds for everyone who needs one. And this is in Cuyahoga County, and also partially funded by the city of Cleveland. Not many communities have that, and maybe the worst example would be Los Angeles, Skid Row, areas like that, tens of thousands of people unsheltered. For us, we work really hard to make sure that there's enough beds. So if someone is unsheltered, it's for a reason different from just not enough beds. This lists what our shelters are. The men's shelter, people call it 2100 for short. 2100 Lakeside is our big one. We operate an overflow shelter. When we're full, we still have beds. We operate a family shelter when the regular traditional family shelters are full. We have a space called The Haven. It's a former convent near East 55th Street, and has rooms for the families. And then we also coordinate seasonal shelter. When it gets cold out, more people come in for shelter than usual, so we have some sites for kind of like surges. First, I want to say this is really a colorful picture. It's a mural done by Lydia's volunteers with our guys, but some of the basics for our shelter. So these are pre-COVID numbers, and actually, thankfully during COVID, our numbers have been down about 20%, so that's been helpful. But traditionally about 3,500 guys in a year, and we averaged 400 per night. So our population is very diverse in some aspects, and that's part of what Portrait shows. But there's also a disproportionate amount of African Americans. Nationally, African Americans are 3 times more likely to be homeless than whites. And there's some reasons for that. The most obvious is probably years of racism and structural racism and the things that come with that. There was a really cool exhibit that Lydia and I and staff attended. It's called Undesign the Red Line, and it was hosted at Trinity Cathedral, and it showed the old-time red line maps and the history of that, and the direct impact that that's had on African Americans and wealth disparities. I think that the wage disparities, those are bad too, and you can see how big those are, but the wealth disparities are even bigger. It's probably 10 times worse than the wage gap. So by going back in our history, African Americans not having the home ownership opportunities, then that's just impacted kind of generationally. So that's one of the root causes that we're working on. Our staff, we have about 50 staff, and half of them are either formerly homeless or previously incarcerated. And that concept is referred to as having lived experience, so you know what it's like personally, and that can help strengthen you and your ability to serve others. So we're really proud of that, and it's kind of cool that LMM's history has been to recognize that as a strength going way back to the 80s with our care teams. I know some of you have known LMM for a long time. Judy, you probably know CRLC and others. And that was back in the 80s where hired people coming from prison and recognized their special gifts and talents. And more recently in social services, it's a best practice now. And so we're kind of like feel smug about that. We've been doing that for years, guys, but thanks for catching up. At the shelter, we have lots of community partners. We know we can't do everything ourselves. Tons of partners come on site, might be once a week for medical or this or that. So it's a really good partnership. And now I'm going to turn it over to Lydia to talk a little bit about the volunteers. And Lydia, I don't know if you just maybe tell me to click. I know you have a few slides here.
So volunteers provide essential services, and I would include you within that umbrella. You're doing a sock donation drive here, and earlier this year, Ken and a few other individuals worked on one of our gardens. We don't have a huge fleet of maintenance staff, and so for your congregation to have refurbished this garden was considered an essential. But this is Eaton Corporation, who was here this summer for 2 full days. They met essential services, providing and serving meals. And if you ever want to simply serve a meal, I know Brecksville is a long way away, but it's a wonderful introduction to the shelter and getting to know the individuals. And of course, we're always looking for people to provide and serve meals. It's not as complicated as you might think, and you work closely with our kitchen supervisor on that. There's other essential services, legal volunteers who are lawyers and paralegals. There's volunteers who are medical professionals. There's people in our computer lab. There's also volunteers just building up the heart and soul and mind of individuals. We have a list. Oh, here's another Eaton Corporation picture. You can feel free to.
Okay.
I can't think of
Computer lab, I'm catching up.
And so, like, building up, we have a poetry workshop going 12 years strong, and many interactive workshops that build up the spirit, Bible studies, scripture studies. And we have a listening program. Those with pastoral listening skills are invited to simply sit and listen in a non-judgmental way with shelter residents. Donations such as you are doing. And finally, I would love to work with you on ideas of how you might contribute. There were these ladies from IBM years ago who said, how do the men keep their clothes neat, say for job appointments? And they had sewing skills. And from that conversation, they started coming back twice a month to sew the men's clothes on a Saturday. And they're still doing it. In fact, it's grown. And they said their favorite part was simply the interactions with the shelter residents in a really natural setting. And in fact, there was a piano in the room where they were sewing. And so one lady started doing piano on their lunch hour, bringing pizza for their men. They always called them their men. It was like they were, and so the relationship part is a really key part of the volunteer program. I invite you to be a part, but thanks what you are already doing.
I have a question. How about laundering their clothes?
We have the state-of-the-art laundry. They're green, so they don't consume a lot of electricity. And so the men are allowed to launder their clothes some twice a week. Those in our emergency area have things laundered each day. The sheets are washed and everything. That's taken care of. Michael's got that covered.
All right, but thank you. So this is a little bit of our data. So we're really big on data and data-driven decision making. So we track everything we can, so we can see trends and really what's going on. So one of our really cool ways to do this is we have a little scanner at the front desk. So when people come in, it's I don't want to say fingerprint because that's it's definitely not that, but it reads your finger. So it's like biometrics. We developed this, found the vendor, and implemented this about 10 years ago. So I know biometrics, like everybody's phone is turning on and doing stuff, but back 10 years ago, it was pretty unique because we used to do sign-in sheets, and then we couldn't read the handwriting, or if we got a fake name or whatever, and so we couldn't really analyze our data. So now we have amazing data. It's real time, and we know exactly our census every day. We know what time people scan in, so it can be something like, a case manager can't reach a guy. He's never there like 9 to 5. Oh, well, let's pull up the information. Oh, look, he's coming in at 11 o'clock every night. Maybe we need to adjust ourselves and do that. So we track as many things as we can. About 600 positive housing outcomes is one of the things we track. The next one, this is a big number, 358,000 basic needs. So that includes laundry, that's in there. The meals that Lydia mentioned are in there, and also the shelter nights that we have for everybody is in there. And over 200 people have secured employment. And that's only the count of the people that we helped get jobs. Lots of people get jobs on their own, and it's not part of our records, but we're happy for that. Another important number that we track is our length of stay. So in a given year, how many days is someone with us at the shelter? And the lower the better. Even though we think we run a great shelter, of course we'd rather have people in housing. So our length of stay is probably about 45 days right now, so that's the average. But it is a huge spread. So lots of people, 1 or 2 nights. They literally just need a place for the night, and they're fine, and they go do their thing. Then we also have some people who are chronically homeless, could be a couple years or in and out of the shelter for a few years. So when you kind of mush all that together, we get our 45 days, and we really keep an eye on that and try and keep it as low as possible. All right. So COVID, big topic for us and everyone in the world, I guess. So we had a really quick response when kind of COVID first hit in early 2020. So initial projections were that our homeless population would have a 40% positivity rate. People that don't have health care, people that are compromised, all of the characteristics, generally poor health, that would make you, more at risk, would be our population. So we worked really hard with some great partners. Metro Health in particular came on site and started doing vaccines when those became available. But for a while there, like everyone, they didn't have that yet, and we were really worried about outbreaks. And it was pretty amazing. Our COVID positivity rate for this entire time has been less than 5%. And that's generally, hey! Yeah, fingers crossed, we probably have outbreak pending. So it's been, and I'll tell you guys a little more about how we got there, but it was just really helpful that the federal government, state, local, all had money for things that would be solutions to achieve that. And usually in our line of work, the money is the hardest part to get. We got great ideas, but how are we gonna fund it? But this time there were funds available, so that was really, really helpful for us. So I'm gonna talk a little more about how we got to that 5%. Some of the things on here may be fairly obvious. We did the plexiglass and masks, and at first masks even were hard to come by. It feels so long ago. Where are we going to get all these masks? Like, no one had masks, and Lydia had volunteer groups that were sewing masks for us, and that's kind of how we got through the initial period. We have overhead about wash your hands, and you can't get enough of hand washing. The doctors just told us, like, please emphasize that. Set up extra hand washing stations. So those were some of the early things that we did. We were also able to get once we had vaccines, we were able to get dollars to even incentivize vaccines, and saw our number of vaccines go up. With this ability to track data that I mentioned earlier, we actually set up an additional little field for did the person get vaccinated and the date, so we could keep a rolling average of how we were doing in vaccination. So we were probably at about 40-50% vaccinated, and I know the goal is like 70% to kind of get the herd immunity, but we did pretty good with it. I thought the 50% was good. So this picture, I'm not sure, I feel bad for the group over here. I don't know if you can see this, but you can see it? Okay, great. So that's a concept. We refer to these as pods. So 2100 is basically a congregate shelter. It probably looks like, if you have never been there, what you would imagine a big shelter would look like. Bunk beds lined up, not a ton of distancing. We're trying to maximize the space to accommodate the need. COVID, it's like the opposite. We're trying to deconcentrate the shelter, have the most distance, social distancing, less people in the shelter. But knowing that, we do have a lot of people, we actually had a volunteer architect design what we refer to as these pods. So we were able to build these around the bunk sets and give people that barrier distancing that we previously didn't have. And I'll spend a couple minutes on this topic because it was a really cool effort. So our architect, his name is Syson Bondit, and he is a international expert in refugee resettlement and disaster shelters. So he's been all over the world creating emergency responses. So 10, 15 years ago, the Fukushima disaster in Japan, he went there and helped figure out, we have all these displaced people, what resources do we have, what can we do quickly? He recently came back from Mexico, where he was helping find shelter for maybe surprisingly many displaced Ukrainians. They're going all over the world to find shelter and welcoming places, and so he was designing things for him. So he is so amazing. We have this international expert that's our friend and volunteer who designed these with us. He used a really cool technology, CNC machines that can perfectly cut wood very quickly. We found a Amish, in Amish country, I guess, I don't think he's Amish himself, but he has a barn with 8 machines, and he cut all of the pieces right away, brought them back, and we had volunteers assemble these pieces and put them together quickly. They also, to make it easier to do, they don't have a lot of hardware. It's not hammering and nails. The pieces are cut so precision. It's like a jigsaw. It's Japanese joinery, so the pieces go together, and you hit them with a rubber mallet, and you only have minimal brackets to hold it together. This was our pilot pod, and we wanted to build one first, see how people felt about it, and get feedback from our residents. We don't want to just say, hey guys, this is what we're doing, like, what do you guys think? And a couple things. One was they really liked the little cutouts. It feels almost like stained glass without the glass. We did not want these pods to look like prison cells. That would be like a disaster. And so they look really cool. Here, I can even flip to the next picture that shows them in action. So that's actually them in the shelter. So we were able to do them on the outer walls of the shelter because they mount to the real walls. And you can see they have these kind of cool angled tops. So anything, just a little bit of artistic flair to make them feel more welcoming. And the guys really like them, and they even started their own little naming contest where people would call, have a name for their little pod. And one guy called his Inner Peace Pod. I was like, oh! We have a winner. We have a winner. So that's been that was pretty cool. So that was a big part of our effort. All right, let's see this. Okay, so this next slide has a lot going on here. Okay, so I mentioned how we track our data very rigorously every day. People check in. So that green line shows our daily census, and the numbers are not actually, you can barely see them. Farthest left is that's like at, say, 400. So that would be our normal daily average. And you can see that was in, well, probably can't see, that was in like February, March of 2020, right when COVID hit. So this was before any of our interventions. So one of the quick best practices that was nationally recommended was obviously deconcentrate your shelter. Okay, well, where are people going to go? And the relief dollars that came recommended finding hotels to be a space for that. That's kind of like an obvious fit. People weren't, traveling, and there's places set up to have, to take care of displaced people, if you will. So we've instantly made some relationships with some hotels. We started with a couple hotels in downtown Cleveland. We found a couple of hotels in Lakewood, and we were able to quickly get about half of our population into hotels. And we provided the staff, kept an eye on things, brought meals, and continued to do our services. Case management, we're still trying to get people into housing. Just because they're temporarily at a hotel, that's not the end of the story for us. So the red line is the hotel census. So we actually brought our little scanners and laptops to all the hotels. We still had everyone check in so we could keep track. So you can see we went from 0 to 200, where the red line pops up in, I would say it took us about 3 weeks to get these hotels staffed 24/7 up and running. Staff were really amazing and flexible. So at any point where you see that the red line is higher than the green line, that means we have more than half of our population safe in hotels versus in the congregate setting that we're trying to avoid. So I'll just take a brief comment to say that in the bottom, it's not quite as relevant. That was the up and downs of our other smaller scattered site shelters. But the main point here is how helpful the hotel intervention was. So you can see, we're doing pretty well. Have about half our population in hotels, and then it was actually July 15th of 2021 was when some of you might be familiar that we were at the Ramada in Independence, was one of our hotel sites. And we were getting a lot of pushback and asked to leave. And so that was, I don't know, it was kind of hard on us. It was sad that, the powers that be, didn't want us there. And we had to quickly come up with some solutions and, honor the, direction to leave. So that is where this red line takes a dramatic drop. We lost about probably half or 2/3 of our hotel capacity in a short amount of time, and we're able to still stay at the Lakewood hotels for a little while. So when, in preparation for that pending drop, and we knew we weren't going to be at hotels forever, so we were already trying to think of some ideas. So we were able to launch a couple additional things to prepare for that. So one was, I showed you those pods. Those were only on the outer walls of the shelter because they needed to be so sturdy. So our brilliant planner, Cy, came up with a way to even put an industrial cardboard in between the bunks that were still close to each other that were in the inner part of the shelter. And so we sprayed them, fire retardant, used zip ties, and put them up temporarily. Since then, we found this amazing material called Plascore that is even more lightweight, more sturdy, and washable. They use it in hospital walls. And now we're in process of putting Plascore to replace the junky cardboard in between the beds. Yes?
I have a question
Yeah.
about the Ramada.
Yes.
Independence.
Uh-huh.
Was it the hotel that asked LMM to leave, or was it the city officials of Independence who found a way to say, I want homeless?
It was that. The owner of Independence was the most welcoming of all of the hotels, and he actually also owned the Lakewood ones where we were allowed to stay. So it was really pressure from the city administration of Independence, and in their discussion with the county, who we take our direction from, they agreed to, I think it was like a 30-day notice, and that's where it came from. Yeah. And with that, a 30-day notice, I was able to say, I get it, we need to leave, but we can't just fill the shelter back up. Like we've come so far and been so successful with our keeping COVID's rates down, so we need these additional interventions, and they were able to fund those instead of what was funding the hotels. So those other couple interventions were we were able to do what's referred to as master leasing, where we actually would rent apartment units and we would pay for them and we could place our people in them. So it was like no barrier for our guys. They didn't have to be the ones applying to the landlord and maybe get rejected. We just took over a bunch of units and placed people. The other thing we did was implemented, yes?
Did the powers that be give a rationale for why you had to leave?
No, they did. I'm thinking like the internal motivation probably wasn't the public discussion. The public discussion was that a hotel cannot, so the Ramada is not an extended stay hotel where you could stay like 6 months. And regular hotels have a 30-day normal, like you could stay there for 30 days, but it's really not a problem. People often just check out and check back in. There was national directives for hotels to extend people. There was another hotel that had the National Guard was really nice, that they hosted them for 6 months, and no one said, oh, you guys are violating the 30-day rule. So that was it, and I think that had it become a legal debate, I think that there probably would have been the ability to stay, but it seemed like the county just wasn't up for banging heads on that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was federal CARES dollars, and the CARES dollars were distributed to basically the state, county, and city, and they had their eligible uses, which these were. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just curious about these new walls that have
Yeah.
put up. I mean, I know that there have been concerns sometimes in shelters of privacy, both by the clients that are there,
Yeah.
whatever the official word is,
Mm-hmm.
that they appreciate having some privacy, and yet there's also sometimes concerns about privacy means less ability to keep track of what's going on.
Yes.
Are these going to be able to stay up? Is this something that's going to be a positive aspect of what's available, or is it just more for COVID?
It is, and it sounds like you might have been in our staff meetings. Real big, two different things, privacy versus security, and, heads banging, and how are we going to do this? So we had really helpful, long debates internally about as the pods aren't up anymore, should we have doors on them? And if we did, maybe they could be half doors. If we had doors, would they lock? If they locked, how could we quickly access if someone, needed CPR? So we kind of settled in the middle with the description. With the way those were. So moving ahead, we are going to keep the pods as we are, and people do like them. But more important than that is the county who owns the building has also purchased the building right next to us, and its address is 2020 Lakeside, and they worked with us and our architect to design kind of like a, I don't know, built-in pods, because these are kind of standalone, and I mean, they're still wood and they're a little shaky. So it's going to be built-in doubles and quads that'll have a nice surround on them and an open doors as well. So that's going to give us more space too.
What a tremendous thing for that window thing.
Ah.
I mean, because as they come, and many come from the prison, that to think of that, whoever thought of that,
Yeah.
think of that, and I guess it was listening, which is just a great thing. It's just super.
Thank you. Yeah, I love it, and our request to the architect was, don't make them like prison cells. He's like, gotcha, and he came back with that, and we were like, you accomplished what we asked for sure. And then he put the little slants on the top, and they're pretty cute. So the other intervention that we added in addition to the master leasing was this concept of direct cash transfer. And this is a concept that's been used in different parts of the country for different reasons. I mean, the general concept behind it is that giving poor people money makes them less poor and is helpful to them and their family. And it's a way to help support people that is not as rigorous as some of the existing programs where it's like, okay, well, food stamps can only be used for food, and then people end up selling them to pay their rent, and then they lose the value on the black market. Why not just give someone some funds, and they can be the decision maker for how they can best help their family. So in looking at the direct cash transfer ID concept, we looked at it and said, well, what if we were able to give our guys some funds that would help them move out? And kind of like, no strings attached. It's not a voucher that you have to find housing, and then it's so hard to find housing. And the emphasis with this was that people could link with friends and family who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford to take them in. And so we were able to get approved $600 per person. And the arrangement was they had to agree not to be at the shelter for 2 months was the goal. And we verified that they had a place to go, so mostly friends or family. Yeah, I can take Billy in. That's great. And we would give them $600, and they would sign receipt that they received it. So in the planning meeting for this one, and I don't know if you guys have any guesses how these staff meetings went. What if they go do drugs and come back the next day? What if they do all these terrible things with the money? And we're like, well, I said, but what if they actually find housing and are successfully housed? What if that? Let's give it a chance. So I wasn't sure what we would think of as a successful program on this. One of our programs called Rapid Rehousing, which places people into housing and pays for their rent for 12 months, has about a 70% success rate. And I was like, man, I don't know if we could match that. It's for $600, that would be pretty cool. So 2 months go by, we had 93% success, that the guys honored the 60 days that much. One time. Yeah. We had a handful of people that came back in month 3 and said, "Hey, could we extend?" And we would give them $300 for month 3. That was a few people. And what dawned on me was it was I don't know. I guess it was kind of sad to think that there are family and friends willing to help people, but they're in poverty too, and they can't just take people in. So that amount of money was enough that new household could make it and have some support. So then we looked at, okay, so this high percentage for the 2 months, where were we at month 3? And we were at 87% success at month 3, and that was largely with no additional support. And then we looked at month 4 and month 5 and month 6. And I'll go fingers crossed, we haven't had anyone else come back after those that came back at month 3. So we're still at 87% like at the 6-month mark. So it's just been like a really, really amazing program, and we're asking the county to refund it. It's probably the most cost-effective housing intervention I don't know, that we've ever seen, and it's empowering people with a small amount of money even, and it's been really successful. So thinking about our ability to innovate and get funded these newer ideas and the success they've had has been, I would just have to say, one of the few bright spots of COVID that we've been able to do. Let's see. Well, I can give you the people. You can do the math. So we have of our guys at the shelter, we've gotten 250 people housed. And that's a lot. I mean, if you look at our other data was 600 total housing placements. I mean, that's like, a third of those. But we also, after our very initial success, the county agreed to let us bring this to our partners. So some of you might know NEOC, Northeast Ohio Coalition for the Homeless. They have, they work with unsheltered people on the streets. They've gotten 100 people housed in the same manner, and the women's shelter has gotten 50 people housed through this program. So collectively, we've done 400 people, and it would be just a little over the $600 average because a couple of them got the other 300. So it's been helpful, and in coming out of hotels, I will say it's a lot cheaper than hotels, and it's a longer term solution. So that was helpful. Yeah.
Just another question.
Sure.
Getting people out into someplace where they can live.
Yeah.
In that initial transition, do you have a challenge with basic furniture? Like are they often furnished where they go, or do they have the challenge of a table, some silverware?
Yeah.
Things you run into that challenge, or you solve that?
We do. So for that specific program, it wasn't really an issue because they were going into friends and family. And, they might sleep on the couch or a pull-out or whatever. For our other programs, it is a challenge. We are able to provide just a little thing. It's referred to as a lodging kit, and we give them an air mattress and a little box with some basics. More substantial than that, we connect people with the furniture bank program, facilitate that, and then in a minute we'll see in our housing initiative we have an amazing partner called Humble Design, and they furnish the entire unit for free, and this is for families, but it's really cool. The families can keep the furniture at the point that they might want to move out from that house. So that's been the most amazing of the solutions on that. Yeah. All right, well, that's a good segue to, we can talk about housing. Oh, man, is that right? There we go. Okay, so housing solutions. So we know that housing is the solution to homelessness. Maybe light bulb moment or no kidding. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So first, this chart shows, and this is 15 years from 2000, so we've got to find the updated stats because this ended in 2015. But basically, you can see that rent costs continue to go up at a higher rate than income, making a bigger and bigger rent burden on families. So at the time of this chart, it would take someone 57 hours per week at, I think it was calculated minimum wage just to have a 2-bedroom apartment. So rent burden, according to HUD, should only be 30% of your income. And most of our people are low income with higher housing costs, and they have a big rent burden, and it's also difficult to find units. So that was part of our reason to work more on doing housing ourselves, as well as running the, I mentioned earlier, the family overflow shelter. And that's supposed to be overflow, initially intended like sporadic use when the other shelters are full. The other shelters are always full. And we had over 40 families one night, over 100 people total. And we're like, this is too much for overflow. Let's do housing. So at our agency's 50th anniversary a couple years ago, we started the Breaking New Ground campaign with a goal to do some family housing, and I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. So this is one of our houses. It's a duplex, and it's in the St. Clair Superior neighborhood where our offices are. and it was real cute that the color scheme kind of matched the historical character of the neighborhood. And we use a concept called open housing for our people, and the thought is we kind of stole the term open from a concept for open hiring, which is we're just willing to give someone a job. You know, we're not going to do all this background check and this and that. You're willing to work, let's do it. We'll give you a job. And it cuts through all of the barriers. So we said, well, what if we could do that for housing? So let's just, we're not going to look at, you know, okay, you got bad credit or, you know, whatever you had a criminal background or something. Oh, sure you did. You know, people that are homeless have some challenges in their past, and that makes them stay in shelter way too long. So our only requirement is that the number of the family size matches the occupancy of the house. So, you know, it's not going to be, you know, a family of 5 in a, you know, 2 bedroom. So we match that up, and that's the only thing we do. And it's been really successful. So we're low barrier. It's not hard to get in. We don't have any source of income, you know, rules. Don't take, you know, Section 8 and all that kind of stuff. And that's what we came up with. We also have a shared housing program. And this was one of our guys that went in there. So shared housing is, I more readily think of it as roommates, like many people might have had in college or something. Everybody gets their own room, share the common area, and it's really a way to have cost-effective housing for our lower-income people. Our rent is $390 a month, all inclusive of utilities. So people even at low levels can afford that. This is Kenny Ray. He actually has a portrait here. He's been in and out of the shelter for like 10 years. He's our longest stayer of all time, and he moved into our shared housing. And Lydia caught a picture of him holding his house keys, which we're ecstatic about that. Let's see. For furniture, this is one of our family houses, and it just shows that to degree this partner Humble Design does. I mean, they lay it out, artwork and everything. They're really beautiful. And Lydia, here, I'll ask you to just comment on your little volunteer teams for this.
So increasingly, volunteer teams are working at these affordable homes. This summer, they painted that front porch, and just a great variety of people coming together for that. And there's gardening that's been going on, and cleaning the inside of apartments for a family. And that's at another affordable home, Bonnet House. So I invite you. There'll be the architect already asked me about gathering a team to paint next spring as another house over the summer.
Cool. All right, we'll roll through a couple housing slides. So the other thought we have is that new technologies could drive down the cost of housing and make it, you know, more readily available. So I mentioned how our architect side did the pods with CNC. He's been working on a design manual for us to use that similar technology to be able to build, not like tiny houses, but just small houses, and that could potentially be largely volunteer driven, except for the trades that you obviously need the trades for that. So we're working on a little demonstration house that we might try to replicate. Another one we were looking at, and this was pre-COVID, was shipping containers. People were doing amazing housing with that. We were talking to some people. When COVID hit, shipping containers used to be like almost free because there was too many of them, and now they're like high demand. So we put that one on hold. We'll go next slide. 3D printing is a really cool concept. Here's pictures of some different styles. Basically, it's what you would think of with, like, you know, a little 3D printer that prints little plastic things, but it uses it prints with concrete. It has kind of like a fire hose looking extruder, it's called, and can print the shell of a house in as little as 24 hours. This was one done in Austin by Icon as a 3D printer, and it shows some of the interior walls are just really cool. You could leave them just the natural concrete, or you could finish them if you wanted. So we're really interested in exploring this, and our architect designed this one for us. This would be 1,000 square foot, probably small, three bedrooms, and the claims for 3D printing are that They're extremely cost effective, and I've heard some estimates that just seem way too low. We're thinking this might be more like $120,000 when a new build traditional materials might be double that. So we're interested in trying to do a pilot house on the 3D printing. And then the last one on housing is this is one that we actually got funded for. So this is going to be 4 efficiency units, 400 square foot each, but it's going to be built into a 1,600 square foot house that just looks like a regular house, on the street and fit into the neighborhood. The county gave us about half the money. We're almost done raising the other half. And this is really cool. It's going to be an integrated solar roof and extreme insulation. We will probably be close to 0 utility cost. Our builder is this awesome guy. His name's Packy Highland. He started Highland Software in Westlake, and he retired early, and he's big into energy efficient housing builds. So this is going to be our first one. We're in the process of picking the plots in our neighborhood. We're going to need at least 2 because to get the solar, we don't want like a big tall house right next to it and ruin the solar. So that's it on the housing, and we're going to end with Lydia's going to tell us a little more about portraits. I'm going to turn my alarm off. We have 7 minutes, and including questions as well.
So, just real briefly, Portraits of Homelessness is all about the humanity of the individual over the stereotype. When Michael was talking about the individuals who were at the Ramada Inn, my heart just broke because I know the humanity, the commonality between all of us, those who are homeless and those who are not. And the volunteer program was out at the Ramada Inn. These individuals who we were interacting with suddenly had all these labels put on them. So years ago I started this project to get beyond the stereotypical impression. I was struck by the stories and the faces of individuals, and so I started photographing and writing down their stories almost for myself because I thought, man, this is too good to just let pass by. And later on, then Foundation stepped in for a more formal portrayal. And so that's what you have here, and we travel around the region to give the human face versus the stereotype of individuals who are homeless. That's it in a nutshell.
All right. Yes. So I know we had great questions along the way, but we still have a few minutes on any other questions or comments. Yeah.
You talk about vocabulary. Sometimes folks say homeless, sometimes say unsheltered. Does it make a difference?
Yes. So I would, in general, go with the concept of person first, language. So it's like a person who is homeless, would be good. I was thinking also some of our people had been in prison, old days, ex-con, community reentry helped promote ex-offender, and that was years ago. Now it would be person previously incarcerated or returning citizen is probably the best one for that. Lydia, anything else on with the labels?
I was going to say that was part of my speech. I wanted
Oh.
to person first language, that was so foundational at LMM, and that really gets to our vision and mission. We long for the wholeness of all people. We really recognize the humanity and want the wholeness of all people across the board. So it is a person who is homeless. And always those at LMM kind of cringe when we hear the poor or the homeless. A person isn't defined by their condition.
Good.
a new shop that opened at City Hall 3 days ago. And it will next be at Trinity Cathedral. And I'll send Deb an invitation, which she might send to all of you if you're interested.
I want to give a quick commercial for what I know you're on directly for the food truck. Next, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm so glad the food truck's going to be here next week, and LMM in our workforce development program has some really great culinary programs. One is called the Central Kitchen, where they provide the meals to most of the homeless shelters in Cleveland, including ours. And then they also have a culinary arts program where the students help make some of the meals for that. And then they created another line, if you will, of a Cafe 45, LMM's on 45th Street, and so they do catering and this food truck, and it's got amazing food. It's, you know, it goes to the food truck events, food truck parks, and all of that, and it generates revenue for the program, but more importantly provides hands-on, you know, training and employment for people that have completed the program. The Chopping for Change culinary program is largely partnered with the women's prison, which is not far from us in Cleveland. And it started with, like, this is years ago when we started it, basic skills, and then it got like a Serve Safe certification, like you know how to handle food, and then manager of Serve Safe, and then it became a vocational program of the state at 6-month mark, and now it's actually a full-blown associate's degree program that someone can get from coming through us, and with transferable credits to some partner universities. So it's really grown in its evolution, and the food truck is it's really cool when I see it show up at some of these places. So thank you, Randy.